through the cycle. I also added to Nvidia. We started buying that 2 weeks ago. I just believe that it's lagged so much. It's actually underperforming the group by 53% year to date. It trades at 18 times forward estimates. That's the cheapest it's traded at since 2019. And we know that they dominate the GPU market. I understand there's competition coming, but they will always dominate the GPU market in my mind. And they have new products coming. And this is a company that's growing revenues in the 80s, gross margins in the 70s, and they're going to double their free cash flow between now and next year, end of next year. And so I like that visibility as well. And I think there's a good value there.
Yeah, I saw this interesting stat from Opco this morning, guys, with Micron and Nvidia are the top two contributors to year-over-year earnings growth for the S&P in Q2. If these two companies were excluded, according to Opco, the blended earnings growth rate of the S&P for Q2 would fall to 16.8% from 24.7%. That's a 790 basis point improvement. Joe, I know you own these two as well. Are these must-owns, just given their impact to earnings growth in Q2?
Well, look, I think if you have not owned them, the right perspective to take is you now have a pullback into what is technical support.
Well, you did. Micron's up 10% today.
Right. And you're technically still sitting above the 100-day moving average. I think the fundamentals are well known about memory, high bandwidth memory, and the universe of AI infrastructure. We know hyperscalers will continue to spend, and they are ultimately going to benefit. I think from a sentiment positioning standpoint, they reached an extreme. They went parabolic, and you needed to work off that overbought type of condition. And I think that's, in fact, what you've done. So if you do not have a position, you have what I would call a low-risk, well-defined point of entry here versus these critical supportive moving averages. If they break down below it, then you can make a strong argument that maybe there was a significant inflection point that was traced out several weeks ago. But I hold them from a core perspective in the ETF. I'm not adding to them here because I do think we've worked off the significant fever. And I think overall, you've seen the momentum factor come down dramatically this month. Okay, one of the worst months for the momentum factor in the last 10 years. And it seems to me you have a little bit of a handoff, and what's saving the market is the performance of the mega cap. It's your Apple, it's your Meta, it's your Amazon. They're performing, Nvidia. They're all performing really well in July, and I think that handoff might continue. So I'm a little bit muted in terms of how I think about positioning. If you're there, stay there. If you're not there, lowest point of reference. Don't get overly excited about a trade that probably saw its most strongest intensity several weeks ago.
Well, I guess the key question too, Josh, is whether this is a factor unwind in terms of momentum and a lot of the AI infrastructure exposure, or a fundamental unwind. This is a question that Wells Fargo was asking this morning. And if it is purely factor-based and positioning-based, do you feel like that unwind is to a point now where it's completely been flushed out?
Well, the market, it doesn't matter what I think, because the market is telling you that that they're buying the dip, and they think that most of what went on was technical and not fundamental. That's why the entire AI trade is ripping today. Not just the semis, but all the non-technology companies that have been caught up in this whole AI CapEx build-out theme. They're all up. DRAM's up 10% today. The top performing stocks in the S&P: Ciena, SanDisk, Western Digital, Micron, Intel, AMD, Corning. So it's all one trade. The trade got washed out this month. Joe made a really good point, I think, and we had this handoff underneath the surface of the market that allowed us to not give up too much ground in the S&P at the index level. And the market today is telling you they want to be long these names. Now, why today? This is the thing that nobody's brought up yet. If you're bullish on this theme, you can't not be in these stocks ahead of Google, because what the Google earnings report does for us every quarter is it serves as this sort of like, come on into the revival tent for Brother Love's Traveling Salvation Show. It's the affirmation that everybody needs to hear about the state of CapEx, the forward guide for CapEx, the fact that all these projects are going ahead, maybe even more projects than we thought about 90 days ago, the last time they reported. So like if you're bullish, you need to be in ahead of Google, not sitting on the sideline, because this is arguably the cleanest AI story in the entire market from a hyperscaler perspective. I also think, it's a really healthy tape. The fact that we had these stocks 20, 30% drawdowns, you would have thought, oh no, now the whole market's going to sell off because it lost its leadership. Number one, that didn't happen. And number two, this has been a really helpful reminder for traders. Ain't no such thing as one-way trades. It doesn't exist. The best stocks in the market, the most powerful names, the best earnings stories, they're going to have down days, they're going to have down weeks, or even a down month on the way toward higher prices. We need to get that reminder. If they just go parabolic every single day the market opens, then you're in for a real crash. And fortunately, this is what keeps the market honest. This unwinds some of the leverage. This gets people to actually hit the sell button on some of these 2x ETFs. Like, this is what you need for a longer-term uptrend. So I'm really pleased with the way not only these stocks are rebounding, but the way the overall market is processing what's happening and living through it.
This trade is showing it still has plenty of juice, plenty of life left in it. And why do you think that this area has been too quickly taken out to the woodshed?
Sure. Hi, Kelly. I think tech has always been deflationary, right? Whether we look at the PC era, whether we look at internet, whether we look at smartphones, whether we look at cloud computing. So technology has always been deflationary. That's because there are a number of global forces that come together to drive the most efficient infrastructure. And I think what we are seeing right now is there was a lot of focus on the frontier model developers in the US, and now you see the Chinese model developers come to the front. And I think that competition can only be a very good thing for the enabling infrastructure layer. So I think the fundamentals are very strong. The demand environment is very strong. Supply is very well stabilized. But we just came from a quarter where the semiconductor index ran up over 80%. So I think a little bit of a breather was probably to be expected.
Okay, but you say the bigger concern a lot of people have, which is here come cheaper competitors, whether they're from China or the one we'll talk about later in the show. Here come cheaper CXMT and these other component makers, which may be, lower cost producers. And we've all seen this playbook before. When the lower cost producer comes into the market, it tends to set the price and displace the other. So why shouldn't holders of Micron and Western Digital and SanDisk and all of these names be a little bit worried about that?
Sure. So let's separate the places where the competition is happening. The large language model layer, that's where you're seeing the competition between OpenAI, Anthropic, right, all the new Chinese open source models. And by the way, there are a number of open source, open weight models that are available in the US also, including one from Nvidia. That place is certainly getting very competitive, but we think it actually democratizes the availability of that large language model and the layer. But where you have real entry barriers, where you have the larger competitive moats, is in the semiconductor layer, right? You mentioned CXMT. CXMT does not produce any high bandwidth memory or any of the advanced NAND memory that is required for the AI layer. So I think the CXMT competition that is going to come, that is also only going to help alleviate the shortages that are in the low-end consumer part of the market, right? They will go after the PC market, they will go after the phone market that are not being served right now because all the capacity is moving to AI. So right. we don't think that competition means much.
They might start there, but why wouldn't they work up the food chain? In other words, once you have a toehold in this area, I'm not saying this is easy, but obviously there's a pattern here. You establish a toehold in the market, and then you ultimately climb up, whether it's them or one of these other competitors, going after the most lucrative area.
Sure. Look, anything can be done. It's a matter of time and cost. Building a new fab, once you have the technology, takes between 2 to 3 years and costs $10 to $15 billion. So even if they have the technology today, by the time they put it into practice and implementation is 3 years from now. Right? So anything can be done. And by the way, it's not that the existing suppliers, right, Micron, Samsung, and others, they are not just sitting still. Every year they come out with new technology, and that new technology is implemented and co-designed with computing, with networking. So these things are not happening in isolation where somebody comes out with a cool chip and then suddenly, right, competitors swoop in. No, you have a very strong of integrated co-design activity that is going on at all the times with between the memory companies, the networking companies, and the Nvidias, AMDs, and Broadcoms of the world, and putting that entire ecosystem together, I think is going to be very hard for China. It doesn't mean they can't innovate in specific subsets of that market. They absolutely can. But I think to put it all together, along with all the software and developer ecosystem, I think that's a very, very long time from now.
And speaking of NVIDIA, there's a headline this morning. NVIDIA and Nebius, an investment in Nebius, is helping Nebius this morning. What's the latest here?
Yeah, so the reports, based off the 13G filing that NVIDIA put out, they report holding 22.3 million Nebius shares. Now, Nebius, of course, rallying on this news is the vow of confidence, a vote of confidence from NVIDIA to be an investor. NVIDIA's stake also includes 1.19 million shares that were previously reported by NVIDIA in its 13F. And these 21.1 additional shares were issuable upon exercise of a warrant that NVIDIA acquired back on March 11th. Now, technically, NVIDIA can't exercise the warrant before September 11th because the warrant may not be exercised within 60 days of July 13th, but NVIDIA may be deemed beneficial owner of those shares as of that date.
Okay, what's at stake here when you think about this? It obviously looks like it's a tailwind for Nebius, but it feels like the market is still trying to suss out the potential for NVIDIA here. I mean, shares of NVIDIA are higher at the moment, not massively compared to Nebius.
Yeah, this is marginal when you think about the size of NVIDIA, but I do think that these type of relationships make sense at the moment. NVIDIA needs access, and all these hyperscalers need access to the compute that these neocloud companies are building. And so you look at a company like Nebius, it's trying to scale operations. So in order to do that, it needs a relationship with the GPU makers and providers like NVIDIA, but it also needs capital. And so NVIDIA establishing, an investor relationship will give it that inflow of capital. But also, NVIDIA, has a pretty good visibility into these companies, and probably, as I said, it's a vote of confidence that what Nebius is doing in terms of scaling and how they're running the operation, NVIDIA probably sees confidence that they're going to be one of the winners in NeoCloud.
Would you say we're still in this sort of animal spirits period in the retail trading universe?
Well, I think, again, the buy the dip mentality has served people very well over the last basically 10 years, Andrew. So I think it's old habits die hard. Yesterday was quite a disappointment in the fact that people came in, bought early. We saw a nice rally in the S&P early, and then it just continued to slowly fade all day long. Today seems to be setting up the same way. We'll see if that happens. If you look at the S&P 500 cash, the SPX, we are pricing in a $107 move between now and Friday, which, we're seeing getting about 40% of that according to the future, at least this morning. So we'll see if that continues overall. And again, although, as you guys have talked about, there's a lot going on in the world, a lot going on in terms of international conflict, et cetera. At the end of the day, people seem to be shrugging it off quite a bit, and maybe more than most of us expect that people would. You look at the VIX. The VIX is, under 18, so a warning level is usually around 20. So as you look around, those signs that you normally see that are of caution really aren't flashing too brightly overall.
When you think about the earnings reports right now coming in, do you think we're in a rotation that's actually going to broaden out? I mean, that's, I think, one of the big questions right now. That's, have we moved away from the AI trade into something else? But is the AI trade the thing that's levitating everything else?
I think what the earnings season is going to show us is whether the AI spending is going to have a return on investment. I think that becomes the major question overall. We've seen so much incredible spending on here, and we saw it, the last two quarters where the questions finally started to get a little bit harder. You see something like IBM coming out, tomorrow, and with one contract, et cetera, that stock's down 25%. And as they come out, one of the interesting things to me on their earnings tomorrow is they've fallen 4 out of the last 5 earnings dates. We'll see if they can break the cycle there. Tomorrow they're expecting about a 6% move overall. And what's really interesting is, you know, many of the stocks coming out, Andrew, if I look at how people are playing them from options, they're playing them for the upside. IBM is a very split deck, and I guess you know, it would make sense because we're seeing as many 200 puts trading as we're seeing 230 calls trading in there. So people really are hedging themselves there overall. But the mentality still persists. If I look across the board, that particularly from the retail side, the buy the dip mentality is still living strong overall. I think people expect us to continue to rally.
JJ, I feel like you always have some interesting insight about sort of specific stocks where people are making some unique trades. Are there other names where there's some interesting stuff going on in the options market?
Yeah, and two that I think people really care about very significantly. Number one being Tesla. So if I look at Tesla coming out tomorrow, what was being priced in the options is about a 7% move. The reason I find that notable, Andrew, is that the average over the last 2.5 years for Tesla has been a 9% move. So people aren't seeing the ranges of moves we normally see in there. And as you know, this is definitely a retail favorite overall. So I do want to keep my eye on this one. The 400 calls, particularly seeing a lot of action in here for earnings. So again, I think people will want to keep an eye on that one. And the other one, of course, Google, which is also a favorite of retail, trading at a almost similar price point, just a little bit lower than Tesla. And Google, we're expecting about a 5% move overall. And where we're seeing a lot of activity there is in the 390 calls. So again, you know, my whole point about buy the dip, about having solid earnings, as I said, in IBM a little bit more split, Tesla and Google, what you're really seeing is people playing for the upside, playing for a good earnings report.
JJ, let me throw out one other, I don't know if we'll call it retail darling or not, given where the stock is right now, but SpaceX, of course, which we've spent a lot of time talking about, a lot of attention on around well, the world. And you were talking about Tesla. What made me think of it is we've been talking about the prospect that SpaceX could one day buy Tesla. Tesla stock, obviously, or SpaceX's stock hasn't performed perhaps the way they were hoping for, at least initially. Probably makes buying Tesla harder in this particular moment. But what is the retail trade saying in terms of the options market on SpaceX right now?
You know, people overall still playing this one a bit to the upside, Andrew, to quite honestly with you. And what I think is really interesting about SpaceX is I look back at Meta when it first came out. And you remember there was this explosion to the upside. People all excited. The stock sold off a bit, you know, kind of regrouped, and then slowly but surely came up. We'll see if SpaceX can do the same. Now, the difference in SpaceX, as we know, is the valuation. I still think people are trying to get their arms around, you know, where it came out at. Was it the right valuation there? So we may have a little bit longer until this one can really rally significantly as that sort of gets chewed up by the market. And again, we saw that report last week where almost 30% of the stock was of the outstanding stock right now was shorted. So again, that's a really tough battle to climb, and it's going to take a little bit longer than it may to rally. But when you have that kind of open interest, as we've seen in so many stocks before, if it gets a little bit of momentum, that momentum can be a bit of a flywheel as some of those shorts have to cover.